What is up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is another true crime case that I feel like everybody's covered. So, I've only done another one where I saw lots of videos for. That was my Evelyn Boswell case that I saw everybody filmed a video for. I decided that I would do a very famous case for today's video, and you can probably tell by how I'm saying it. It is the O.J. Simpson murder trial. So it is one of the biggest trials, and is actually dubbed the trial of the century because of how popular O.J. Simpson is, or was, how famous he was at the time, and just the nature of the crime, so that makes sense. So we gotta give a little backstory on who O.J. is, who the murderees were, the ones that the victims were. The O.J. Simpson case is one of the biggest cases in American history, considering that everybody thought that O.J. Simpson, who was an NFL star, killed his ex-wife Nicole Simpson Brown and her friend Ron Goldman. So, little history on O.J. His actual name's not O.J. It is Orenthal James Simpson, or as he was dubbed, O.J. or the Juice. He was one of the most famous running backs in American history, considering that he ran 2,000 yards in one season. He spent most of his 10 years in the NFL with the Buffalo Bills, and then spent the last season, 2 seasons of his career with the San Francisco 49ers. So, O.J. was previously married to another woman when he met Nicole. They divorced. Him and his first wife divorced in 1979. He had already met Nicole at that point. He met Nicole when she was 17 years old, and they married in 1985, and they had 2 children together. Their first child was born 7 months after they got married. So Nicole Brown was born May 19th of 1959 in West Germany. She met O.J. when she was 17 while working at a Beverly Hills private club called the Daisy. So she was married to O.J. for 7 years. She had 2 children with him, and their names were Sydney and Justin. During her marriage to O.J., he was physically abusive. Her friends knew it, her family knew it. I think everybody around them knew that he was abusive to her. But O.J. was never arrested or anything, never charged with anything about the domestic abuse, because police just thought he was too famous to be arrested for it. So Nicole would eventually file for divorce on February 25th of 1992, citing irreconcilable differences. So following their divorce, O.J. and Nicole had a very volatile relationship. Like, it was not the best relationship you want after a divorce. So, yeah. But they eventually reconciled. They reconciled pretty close to her death. So, I don't know. So, at the time of her death, Nicole resided at 875 Bundy Drive in Brentwood, Los Angeles, California, with her 2 children. That, keep in mind, her residency is an important factor in the case, because it's literally where she was found. So Ron Goldman, the other victim of the murders, was 25 at the time he was murdered, and he had only known Nicole for 6 weeks. Like, he'd only known her for 6 weeks prior. He technically wasn't even like a friend, like a good friend of Nicole's. So on okay, before I do anything, there is a timeline for Nicole and all of that, and there's also a timeline for O.J. that I wrote down so that I'd have O.J.'s timeline and then that correlated with Nicole's timeline. So on June 12th, 1994, Nicole Simpson Brown and Ron Goldman were found brutally stabbed to death outside Nicole's home. This is the timeline for that night that we know. So around 6:30, after Nicole attended her daughter's dance recital, Nicole had dinner with her friends and family at a restaurant, Mezzaluna. This is also where Ron worked as a waiter, and Nicole's mother left her glasses at the restaurant, and Ron volunteered to take them and drop them off at Nicole's house. Okay, this is where OJ's comes in. Around 6:30 is when she had dinner, okay? Around 10:41 to 10:45, Brian Cato Kalin, who is OJ's house guest at his Rockingham mansion, just a couple miles down the road from Nicole's house, hears a thumping noise on the opposite side of his wall and goes outside to investigate. So around 10:50 to 10:55, Nicole's neighbors see Nicole's white Akita, her dog, by itself barking with bloody paws. Okay? Around 11:01 p.m., after waiting on OJ since 10:25, limousine driver Alan Park sees OJ leaving his house and took him to the airport. At 11:45, OJ gets on the plane and flies to Chicago. Around 12:10 a.m., Nicole's dog leads her neighbor to the dead bodies of Nicole and Ron. Let's see. Okay. Around 4:15, OJ checks into his hotel in Chicago. We've made it to the next day, so it's June 13th now. Around 4:30 a.m., police arrive at OJ's mansion to inform him of Nicole's death, but they don't find OJ, because OJ's in Chicago from what we know. And they find his Bronco, which is white, by the way, and it's blood-stained. And they found a bloody glove that matches the one that was found at the crime scene. Keep in mind, the gloves are a big part as to how so many people remember this case. One was found bloody at the crime scene. Another glove was found at OJ's mansion, bloody. So around 10:45 a.m., the police get a search warrant, and they search OJ's home. They found more traces of blood on the property, and let me see when the next time is. Okay. So, 12 p.m., OJ returns to Los Angeles after hearing about Nicole's death, and immediately after he gets to LA, the police arrest him, and he is taken down to the police station and questioned. Okay, so not much is said about what happened on June 14th, but on June 15th, OJ gets a new attorney, and it's Robert Shapiro. So yeah. June 16th, a funeral is held for Nicole, which OJ, their daughter Sydney, and their son Justin attended. A funeral is also held for Ron the same day. On June 17th, 1994, one of the most memorable moments, aside from the glove moment during the trial, is the Bronco Chase. My parents remember seeing this on TV. My parents are in their 40s. My mom is in her 40s. My dad's in his 60s. My mom remembers watching it. My mom would have just graduated from high school when this happened, and I was talking about this case yesterday, and she was like, yeah, I remember seeing that on TV. The chase lasted almost 45 minutes to an hour and was televised. My mom remembers watching it on TV. There are videos on YouTube, here on YouTube, that you can watch to see the chase. By the way, it is estimated that 95 million people watched the chase. So, the chase wasn't like your typical police chase, where the one that they're going after is going at high speeds. No. They were going about 35 miles an hour in the Bronco, and there was a fleet of cop cars just following them. They were following OJ's white Ford Bronco along Interstate 405 in Los Angeles. And I keep saying them, like people in the Bronco, because OJ wasn't alone in his Bronco. He had a driver, a friend of his college and Buffalo Bills teammate, Al Cowlings. They had been at Robert Kardashian's house that day discussing what was going to happen because, as you know, Robert Kardashian was OJ's lawyer or attorney, whatever. And OJ snuck out with Al. Like, they snuck out the back door and left. They were literally discussing OJ turning himself in. So Al was actually the one driving the Bronco, and OJ was sitting in the back seat. So, prior to the chase, prior to, like, when it was televised, Howard Shapiro, which was OJ's attorney, or OJ's lawyer, my bad, held a news conference in which he said that OJ was distraught and might attempt suicide. This came as a shock, and the LAPD had to declare at this point that OJ Simpson was a fugitive. So, they're chasing OJ down the 405. They're trying to get him to pull over. It's being televised. There are helicopters everywhere. And in the video I watched yesterday for the Bronco Chase, he's going down one way, and then every car on the other side of the 405 is stopping to look at who this is. So while the chase is going on, people who were on the 405 and could hear it on the radio, who were fans of OJ, were pulling over to the side of the road and had signs, apparently, that they had made that said, "Oh, go Juice," or "We stand with the Juice, we love the Juice." Basically, they were showing their support in OJ. Like I said, Al was in the driver's seat. He was the one driving, and it was believed that OJ was in the back seat, though it was never really confirmed where OJ was. But they believe that OJ was in the back seat of the Bronco holding a gun to his head. Like I said, helicopters were following it. They were televising it. It's just very hard to see inside the Bronco from a helicopter that's thousands of feet in the air. So around 9 p.m., the Bronco pulled into OJ's Brentwood home. OJ exited the car, was immediately arrested and booked on a double murder charge, and had no bail. So he was thrown in jail, charged with murder with no bail. So it takes a while. It takes about a month after the Bronco chase for OJ to plead not guilty. And when he pled not guilty, he said, "I'm absolutely 100% not guilty." A judge is assigned to the case, and in September of 94, the prosecution said they wanted life in prison without the possibility of parole. So the prosecution was like, "Hey, we want this man in prison for the rest of his life with no possibility of parole. Like, don't let him in. Don't let him out." So it would take about 6 more months, or hold on, 3-4 months to start the actual trial. It took a few months for the trial to actually start. And on January 24th of 1995, the trial starts with a prosecution, which held Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden. They made their opening statement saying he killed her out of jealousy. He killed her because he couldn't have her. Understandable. A lot of people do it. So the next day, January 25th, the defense gave their statement saying, "This case is about a rush to judgment, an obsession to win at any cost." Which makes sense. And by the way, this was a very, televised trial. People wanted to see what's happening in the OJ case. Like, he's an NFL star. Of course everybody wants to see what's happening to him. So on February 3rd, 1995, Nicole's sister-in-law, Denise Brown, takes a stand and says, by the way, she's in tears when she's giving the statement. She's talking about OJ's abuse towards Nicole. Like, she tells the jury, she tells the people, OJ was abusive. So yeah. On February 12th, the jury visited key locations, including OJ's house, Nicole's house, which were both now crime scenes because Nicole and Ron were murdered outside Nicole's home, and blood was found at OJ's house. So about a month later, on March 13th, Detective Mark Furman was cross-examined, and he had to basically deny being abusive or being racist. By the way, that comes back to bite him in the ass a few months later, because then he had to be shown a video of him saying racial slurs. I didn't put that in, but I just thought I would just share that. So, Mark Furman also objects to the defense's theory that he undermined the investigation by tampering with evidence. But this is later kind of pushed out the window as well, but the tampering with evidence. March 21st, OJ's house guest is brought on the stand for a second time. So he had already been brought on the stand prior to this, though I could not find anything about his first time on the stand. And he describes his night with OJ before the murders. He just basically was telling about his night with OJ, about how it was normal, and then OJ left, basically. So during his second time on the stand, Marsha Clark, who's on the prosecution side, thought he was flaky, and basically treated him like a hostile witness. She was like, she didn't trust him. And she asked him numerous times if he was changing his statement, to which he denied. And then he even said after he was done on stand, like on trial, he was like, I'm very grateful that I'm not going back out. A few weeks later, on April 4th, 1995, criminologist Dennis Fung admits that proper protocols were not enforced at the crime scene. Remember when I said the detective said that tampering with evidence was like, no, there was no way. The criminologist basically says that it would have been easy to tamper with evidence at the crime scene. A month later, on May 10th, DNA evidence was presented. This included a drop of blood found, and people would learn from this drop of blood that 1 in 170 million people would have the same genetic characteristics as the drop of blood. OJ is one of the 1 in 170 million. Which just means that there's 170 million other people in the world that have the same genetic characteristics. So another month passes, and OJ would try on the gloves. This is, again, one of the biggest parts of the case. There's a photo of him with his hands out, wearing the gloves, and the gloves are too small. So there are theories about that. Where he tried on the gloves, the prosecution was like, he owns or owned a similar, if not the same, pair of gloves. But the gloves don't fit when the defense has him tried on. Or it might have been the prosecution that had him tried on. Can't remember if it said prosecution or defense. One of the two made him try them on. Keep in mind, these were evidence, so they had OJ put on latex gloves so that he wouldn't tamper with evidence. So there are theories as to why the glove doesn't fit. One theory is that the gloves were soaked in blood, basically just covered in Nicole and Ron's blood, that it soaked into the fibers of the gloves and just shrunk them. If that makes any sense. There's no evidence to prove that one, though. Like, there's no evidence whatsoever to show that the blood had seeped through the glove completely to shrink it. Another theory that was really confusing for me was that Nicole purchased the gloves, and then people were like, well, how would the killer have gotten Nicole's gloves if they're Nicole's gloves? That one is one that I don't understand either. So like I said, OJ was wearing latex gloves so he didn't tamper with evidence in the gloves. People have assumed that this caused friction when he put the gloves on, which would have made them appear smaller. And there was also another theory of that OJ had his hands like set a certain way or positioned a certain way so that when he pulled the gloves on, it would look too small on him. If that makes any sense. I just thought that one was really weird. Trial would go on for a few more months after the DNA and the glove thing. On September 28th, 1995, the defense delivers their final statement, their closing argument, to the jury with the famous quote that I think everybody knows if you know about the O.J. Simpson case: "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." Basically talking about the gloves don't fit, you gotta acquit him. And that's exactly what the jury did. On October 3rd, O.J. Simpson was acquitted of murder. The jury had deliberated for less than 4 hours and found O.J. not guilty of 2 counts of murder. This had mixed reactions from everybody. There were people who believed O.J. did it. There were people that believed O.J. didn't do it. There were people that were like, well, he could have done it, but he might have not done it. There was just so much. The evidence pointed towards OJ, but the evidence also didn't point towards OJ. Hence everyone being like, oh, somebody tampered with the evidence, blah, 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 blah. But this wouldn't be the end of legal troubles for OJ surrounding Nicole and Ron's death. So, in 1997, 3 years after the death of Nicole and Ron, a civil jury found OJ liable for the murders, and they ordered him to pay $8.5 million in compensatory damages to Ron's parents. And then, a few days later, on February 10th of 1997, a jury ordered OJ to pay $25 million in punitive damages to the relatives of Nicole and Ron. And then the jury also ordered OJ to pay $12.5 million to his children that he had with Nicole. I don't know why. So OJ also had more legal trouble following the deaths of Nicole and Ron that had nothing to do with the deaths of Nicole and Ron. He was also sent to prison for that, and he's out now. He's out living his life. There are memes of OJ Simpson for Corona that I think are funny. So, there are theories to the murders of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman. And I've heard this theory before, and I thought it was a really weird theory because it kind of makes sense, but like at the same time it doesn't. The first theory is that OJ didn't do it, but his oldest son did it. So like I said previously, OJ was married prior to being with Nicole. So he had, I think, 2 or 3 kids with his first wife. And I do know that one of his children with his first wife passed away. But he has another son with his ex-wife named Jason. Apparently, Jason Simpson was obsessed with his stepmother and killed her in a fit of jealous rage when she skipped a family dinner he'd planned. And then he was like, Dad, help me cover this up. That's a theory, that OJ's son killed her. And then he was like, Dad, I need help. And then just kind of blamed everything on OJ, if that makes any sense. So, the evidence behind this theory is not really concrete. It's all circumstantial. Because Jason had a history of mental illness, like violent mental illness. And just because you're mentally ill doesn't mean you can kill somebody. But apparently there were also holes in Jason's alibi for the night that Nicole was murdered. I don't know what his alibi was because they never stated it. So another theory comes in, and this theory makes sense as to why people would say it, because it's a celebrity, that OJ did it because at the time the murder happened, OJ was mind controlled by the Illuminati. It's Hollywood. Everybody thinks that everyone in Hollywood is mind controlled by the Illuminati. But people say that at the time that the murders happened, OJ Simpson was a subject of the CIA's MK Ultra mind control experiment. Which is a whole nother video I could do on, but I'm not gonna do right now. I've actually watched like 2 videos on it just because it kind of seems intriguing. So they say at the time of the murders, OJ was being mind controlled, and that the Illuminati was using OJ to kill his ex-wife and Ron, who, by the way, were 2 white people. If they had 2 white people and a black man murdered them, the Illuminati thought, oh, perfect, we can make it a race war. Which I don't understand. But then people also connected it to the Charles Manson thing, where they believe that they were mind controlled by the Illuminati. There's a whole theory on it. If you want to go check it out, go check it out. There are a couple other theories as well. One is that OJ hired a serial killer to do it, or that it was just like a random person did it and then they somehow made it to look like they blamed OJ on. It's so confusing in the other 2. But yeah, there's a couple more theories. There's probably more theories not out there. But that's the end of the video. OJ was never found technically guilty of murdering Nicole and Ron, and he never went to prison All he had to do was pay money back to their families and to his children. And nothing really... I can tell you that during the trial, I forgot to mention this because it's on OJ's timeline. During the trial, OJ released a book about his love for Nicole. I thought that was really weird. You're being accused of murdering her, and you're gonna be like, let me just release this book about me and her. I loved her. There's no need to worry. I will say that I don't know for sure if OJ did it. I've watched numerous videos on this case for years, and I've never known if he did it or not. Like, I can wrap it around my brain that it makes sense that they would go for the ex-husband, because that's usually the first person they go for, especially if there was a history of physical abuse. But if you're there to kill Nicole, why kill Ron? Ron knew her for 6 weeks. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah. But leave your guys' suggestions down below. Suggestions? What you guys think happened? Do you think OJ did it? Do you think it was just a random mugging that they so happened to blame on OJ? Do you think Jason, OJ's son, did it? Do you think OJ was mind controlled by the Illuminati and did it? I don't know, but I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on that, because all the evidence points to OJ. It just makes sense that it would be OJ. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and like I've said in the last video, please leave suggestions in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. Just do it. It's not that hard. It's free. So yeah, but yeah, leave suggestions of what you guys want to see down below. I've got a lot more cases coming, so don't worry. But yeah, see you guys later. Bye.